Hello everyone, welcome back. It's the evening of May 18th, 2023. We're out in the orchard taking a look at the aftermath of the frost damage, I should say the heavy freeze damage that we had last night on the night of the 17th. Our temperature in the orchard got down in most places to about 26, 28, somewhere in there. And you can see the damage that did to these pawpaw flowers that were in full bloom. As we look around the tree, it's not just the flowers, you can also see damage to the new growth, which is something that's a little different in pawpaws versus like apples and some of the other fruits that we'll look at in this video. Now, the good news is pawpaws are very resilient plants. For one thing, you can see here that's a fruit bud. That will just develop, open up, and flower now. One of the cool things about pawpaws, those flowers are no good anymore. That's not one of the cool things about pawpaws, but one of the cool things is right there. They put out waves of flowers, and so at any one time they have buds at all different stages of development. So that's sort of a unique factor. Yet another cool thing about this tree, and there's some new growth there, undamaged, new growth, totally dead from the frost or the freeze. Really should say freeze, not frost. And here's a flower that just somehow managed to make it through. And it's right next to one that's completely dead. You can see the stem is nice and green. The stem has turned black. The flowers turned black. It's soft in texture. You can tell it's been destroyed by the freeze. The reason it's important to say that is a little bit of frost doesn't hurt these, but when you get into the mid-20s, that's a whole different story when they're in full bloom. But pawpaws have this cool feature, if you will, where they put out multiple waves of flowers in a given season. So here's last night before the freeze. Look how pretty that tree was in full bloom. Absolutely gorgeous. And also some green bells. So here's a picture also from last night before the freeze. These buds here are no good anymore. Today there was some of the kind of freezer burnt ones you saw. But in this one picture, you have a red, a green, and in the upper right-hand corner, a very early stage bud. So pawpaws will put out a first wave of flowers, a second wave of flowers, and often a third wave of flowers. Although I've noticed that third wave doesn't always come if it's not needed. So like they'll just kind of hold those buds in reserve and then send them out if needed. So it's just a really cool defense mechanism for the late frosts, and pawpaws are a native plant to our zone in our area in western New York and many areas in the east coast. And so here again is an example of a early stage bud and then what I call the green bell phase just below it. So pawpaws will be okay. Here's our lilacs as we walk through and check out some of the other areas of the orchard. Totally unaffected, 26 degrees last night, but lilacs are tough as nails. I just like having them around for many, many reasons. Pollination, but they're just one of my favorite plants. Let's take a look at the cherry tree. This year we were finally going to get some Rainier cherries. As you can see, that fruit's been damaged. It's discolored a little bit. This was the first year we actually got cherries to set on this tree because usually the frost kills them before they ever get pollinated. So these, I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, you can see that there's a lot of the cherries, which is really disheartening because I've never had a single cherry on this tree until this year, but you can see they're definitely damaged, so I don't know. We'll have to just see, so that's one of the things, after a couple weeks, then it'll become a little bit more clear if the fruit really swells up and does well. This is our Santa Rosa plum. Also, we've never had fruit on this, but it's also a very young tree. This one, though, the fruit doesn't seem damaged at all. That's a representative sample. I looked at a bunch of them, so cautiously optimistic. That looks pretty healthy, actually, so we'll see what happens with that one. Here's another pawpaw in a different part of the yard, and this one also took quite a beating. This one didn't have any flowers on it, but lots of new growth, and it seems very susceptible, this one, for whatever reason. And there are microclimates in your yard, and so this is the coldest part of the yard. This, and then where these other 4 pawpaws that we're walking to are planted. This area, you can see that white receiver hanging from this pawpaw. This is the Shenandoah, is usually about 5-6 degrees colder than the rest of the yard. Now that's not all bad news, because what that also means is these are nowhere near as far along as the other trees, and so they took comparably less damage, because as you can see, everything is just starting, and when it's just starting, it's not as susceptible as when it's fully open. Those buds right there, you have two flower buds right next to each other, a green and sort of a reddish one. Those are just starting, and they didn't seem to take any damage. That flower that was a little bit earlier, yeah, that one's no good, but overall that tree is just waking up. This is NC1 right next to it. Kind of same deal, some new growth there that took some damage, but overall all these buds are just in the very early stages. And so again, sometimes if you're in the really cold part of your yard, as you can see there, those little buds are really healthy, green and red. Some more really healthy fruit buds, and those will come out in a couple of weeks, and they should be just fine. Some of that new growth, obviously that's not going to grow back, but it'll put out new leaf buds and other parts of the tree, and it'll fill out. So, that'll work out fairly well in the end, even though it's kind of a bummer now. And then this one hasn't even woken up yet, although it is alive. I did scratch it to see, but it's got a lot of buds. This is our Asian pear tree, and some of those are not necessarily pollinated. These are definitely pollinated, and the defense that apples and pears have, so pawpaws put out waves of flowers, apples and pears will just produce thousands of fruit when they get mature. And so if you have a 90% bud kill, but you have 1,000 fruit, you still have 100 fruit that'll come to fruition on each tree, which is still a lot of fruit. And so even though 90% bud kill might sound, terrible or catastrophic, it might not be. You might still get a full crop. That's the built-in defense those fruit have. This is a baby plum, a Jefferson plum we just planted. Did no worse for the wear at all after the freeze. So let's take a look at our apples. This is an apple graft, actually. This is the smokehouse graft I made in 2021. It's got fruit on it. Those look pretty good even after the freeze. This part of the orchard only got down to 30 degrees, which really shouldn't have damaged really anything. But I'm going to check anyway. This Kid's Orange Red looks beautiful. Tons of fruit. Like I said, and this tree can't handle all that fruit. It will drop some in June on its own, but you'll also want to thin your fruit. Mother Nature may have done it for us last night to some degree, but if you don't thin them, then you're going to get smaller fruit and or lesser quality fruit, and then next year, like my Bartlett tree there, you'll have a biennial plant where you get like 3 fruit on it one year. This one, you can see me knocking some of those off. I just brush against them. If they fall off, then let them fall off, because they're not going to be a fruit. But when they stay like that, that's a good sign that they're not damaged. These look pretty good. This is blue pearmain on bud 9 rootstock. But this is a more sheltered part of the orchard against the house with the fence in the corner and so forth. So it got cold. They were covered in a hard freeze, and here we go. Here's the apples, late flowers. There's like a few there on the whole tree just starting. It always does that. It's not like a pawpaw, but it does send a few late flowers up. It's sort of like a little Hail Mary, like, okay, well, here's our reserve. But as you can see, most of them are long done and pollinated and starting to set fruit. But this little tree here, probably has 1,000 apples on it right now. If it gets down to about 50 to 75, to me, that's perfect for the tree. That's all we need anyways. Here is the golden russet, and this one produces fantastic apples. Another Geneva 11 rootstock. As you can see there, they tend to be in clumps of between 5 and 7. So when you think again of 90% bud kill, even if it was that, which these are nowhere near that, I don't think. But even if it was, every 2 clumps you see is 10, so one of those 10 would be an apple still, and there's just clumps everywhere on this tree. So These look like they're in really, really good shape still, and they were more protected against the fence here as well, and with the house, but those don't even look damaged. And again, this, according to our thermometer, this got down to a low of 30 in this section, which doesn't damage anything. Heavy frost still. It was a good frost on here, but 30 degrees isn't going to damage any of your fruit or fruit buds. You have to have 28 degrees or lower to really do any harm. But look at those. Those look really good. So apples are tough, and every apple is not created equal either. I've noticed that these golden russets and the Kids Orange Red both seem to be a few degrees more cold hardy than the charts suggest, because even on days there should have been some bud kill, I haven't been able to find any. So not every variety of apple is created equal, but look at those. Those are totally undamaged. They look perfect. So that's good news. Let's check our strawberries. Now, I've never grown strawberries. I planted these last year just to get them established. So we didn't get any fruit last year, but this year, as you can see, the bees are out doing their work. I think that the strawberries that are kind of dark inside, the flowers, are the ones that are no good, but the ones that are yellow inside are the ones that made it through the freeze. That could be incorrect. I'm not really sure, to be honest, because I've never grown strawberries, as I mentioned, but the bees like them, and it looks like as I go toward the front, there's more that are kind of dark. As I go toward the back in a minute here, toward the house and all the stucco siding where it's always a little bit warmer because of all the concrete, those look like they did a little bit better. So I'm hoping that that's a good thing. There's a lot more just yellow. They look normal, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I think the strawberries did okay too. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and don't despair if you had a heavy freeze. You'll probably still get some fruit from your orchard.